It was just another morning in Nagasaki. Children swept their doorsteps. A priest adjusted his robes for mass. A boy chased a dragonfly through the narrow alleys near Urakami Cathedral. Fishermen along the coast hauled in nets. Mothers prepared rice and tea. There were rumors of something terrible in Hiroshima, but the war had taught people how to ignore rumors. After all, there had been bombings before, air raid sirens, alerts that turned out to be false. The Americans couldn't hit everything, not all at once, and besides, the sky above was blue, peaceful. But peace was an illusion. Far above the city, nearly 6 miles in the sky, a US B-29 superfortress called Boxcar sliced through the clouds. It carried a bomb unlike anything ever created before, or since. A bomb called Fat Man. It had been built to end the war. It had also been built to show the world what came next. Nagasaki didn't know it was a target. It hadn't been the original one, but that wouldn't matter in the end, because the bomb was armed, and time was running out. The crew of Boxcar had taken off from Tinian Island in the Mariana Chain early that morning. Their primary target was Kokura, a city home to one of Japan's largest arsenals. But when they arrived, thick clouds and smoke from a previous bombing obscured their view. 3 passes, no visibility. They had orders not to drop unless they could see the target. So they turned toward the backup. Nagasaki. Nestled between mountains and the sea, Nagasaki had a long and complicated history. For centuries, it had been the only port open to foreign trade. It had been Japan's gateway to the West, a center of Catholicism, a refuge for hidden Christians after centuries of persecution. And in the final years of World War II, it had become an industrial city, home to Mitsubishi shipyards, steel factories, and torpedo production. But it was not a hardened military fortress. It was a city of temples and schools, of old gardens and narrow alleys, of nurses, students, laborers, families. It was home to nearly 250,000 people, and at 11:02 a.m. on August 9, 1945, it became the second city in history to be destroyed by a nuclear weapon. The bomb detonated at 1,650 feet above the Urakami Valley. The flash was so bright that people miles away thought the sun had exploded. For a split second, there were no buildings, just pure, searing white. Then came the heat. 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. People near the epicenter were incinerated instantly. Their bodies left behind only shadows, burned into walls, stone steps, and railings. A man on a bicycle, a woman hanging laundry, a child at a school window. Gone. The shockwave followed. Moving faster than sound, it tore through the city, flattening wooden homes, buckling steel, and toppling concrete buildings. Fires ignited across a 2-mile radius. Urakami Cathedral, once the largest Catholic church in Asia, collapsed in on itself. Worshippers inside were buried alive. Statues melted. Bells fell. One survivor would later call it the day hell came to earth. Hospitals were destroyed, schools crushed, fire stations and police outposts vanished. Doctors who might have saved others were among the first to die. Water mains ruptured, electricity gone, roads blocked, families separated by collapsed buildings and walls of flame. The city burned into the night. Those who survived the blast staggered through the wreckage, their skin hanging from their limbs like wet rags. Some were naked, their clothes burned away. Eyes swollen shut, hair gone. They didn't scream. Many couldn't. A man lifted what he thought was his daughter from the rubble, only to realize her body had fused to the earth beneath her. In the rivers, dozens fled the fires, only to find the water boiling. The death toll reached 40,000 within seconds. Over the weeks that followed, another 35,000 would die from burns, injuries, and radiation sickness. And in the decades ahead, thousands more, hibakusha or bomb-affected people, would carry the legacy of that morning in their bodies. cancers, deformities, grief, and silence. Among them was Sumiteru Taniguchi, a 16-year-old postman thrown from his bicycle when the bomb exploded. His back was flayed open, raw muscle exposed to the air. He lay on a mat for over 18 months, unable to move, his wounds refusing to heal. He would later become one of the most outspoken survivors of Nagasaki. At the United Nations, he removed his shirt to show the damage. "This is what nuclear war looks like," he said. Japan did not immediately surrender. Even after Hiroshima, even after Nagasaki. Inside the military, many still clung to the idea of resistance. They called for martial law, mass mobilization. They wanted to prepare the population, millions of civilians, to repel an Allied invasion. Surrender, they said, would be dishonor worse than death. But the emperor had seen enough. In a historic decision, Emperor Hirohito intervened directly. On August 15th, his voice was broadcast to the nation. It was the first time most Japanese citizens had ever heard it. In poetic, archaic language, he told the people, "We have resolved to endure the unendurable and suffer what is insufferable." Japan surrendered. World War II was over, but the war didn't end for the survivors. Not really. They awoke each day in ruined cities, their wounds infected, their food rationed, their grief immeasurable. Most of all, they were feared, because no one understood radiation. People believed the hibakusha were contagious, that their children would be deformed, that they were cursed. Many couldn't find work. Some weren't allowed to marry. And yet they endured. They told their stories. They testified. In 1946, an American military report downplayed the effects of radiation, calling it not very serious. Photos of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were censored. The U.S. government wanted to control the narrative. But the survivors remembered. And year after year, on August 9th, they gathered at Peace Park in Nagasaki. They read the names of the dead. They rang bells. They told their children, not to seek revenge, but to warn the world. Nagasaki was not supposed to happen. Some of the scientists who built the bomb had begged for a demonstration instead. Others wanted to give Japan more time to respond after Hiroshima. General Dwight Eisenhower, who led Allied forces in Europe, later said he believed the bombs were unnecessary, that Japan was already defeated. But the war machine had momentum. The scientists had built it, the generals had the planes, and the politicians needed a decisive end. Some historians believe Nagasaki was not about Japan at all, but about the Soviet Union, a show of strength, a message to Stalin. If that's true, then tens of thousands of civilians died not just in war, but in diplomacy by fire. Today Nagasaki is rebuilt, but the scar remains. Visitors can walk through the Hippo Center, stand beneath the ruins of Urakami Cathedral, look into the faces of statues melted by flame, read the poems of survivors, and in the Peace Museum behind glass is a lunchbox, charred, melted, the rice inside burned black. It belonged to a teenage boy who never came home. Next to it, a note from his mother. He left that morning smiling. The last nuclear bomb used in war fell on Nagasaki, but not the last one built. More than 12,000 nuclear weapons still exist today, most of them hundreds of times more powerful than the one that destroyed this city. Nagasaki was a warning, written in blood and ash. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.